Okay, hello everyone. Happy Saturday, August 7th. Thank you for joining us for our CannaCareers program. My name is Shaloma, but feel free to call me Lo as well. I am the founder of Women of Color in Cannabis, and we were founded in 2018 in Brooklyn, New York. But we do have I like to say a national footprint. We have members from all over the country and also international. In 2020, we decided that we wanted to start an employment service program that was really going to provide the tools, the resources at no cost for people who wanted to become employed in cannabis, but had no idea how to do so. We knew we couldn't do this alone and that we needed to partner with people who had expertise, knowledge, and who had skin in the game. And luckily for us, we were able to find our three awesome CannaCareers partners. So one of our speakers today, and like usual, every CannaCareers module, is Ashley Boucher of Quality Control Analytics. We also have Danielle of THC Staffing, and we also have Ann as well of Joint Venture and Company. So we started this program in 2020, and basically we meet every first Saturday of the month where we tackle a new topic on cannabis employment. So no worries, if you missed the first 4 sessions, this is our midterm review. So there will not be a test at the end. Do not freak out. We are not quizzing you or asking you any questions like that. Instead, we have our awesome past speakers, Mika Brown, who will introduce herself in a little bit, and Dion Carroll, who will also introduce herself a little bit, to give you guys an overview of everything you missed. So we'll talk about the past 4 modules. We'll give you time to ask questions. We do have a worksheet that I believe was just placed in the chat. So if you want to follow along and take notes, we have that worksheet that pretty much provides you some keywords, some highlights for the past 4 sectors, which are manufacturing, cultivation, compliance, and retail. It also has some fill in the blanks for you to write some notes. So I'm going to stop talking for now and let Mika and Dion introduce themselves before Ashley and I kind of walk you guys through the past 4 modules. Once again, thank you guys for joining Women of Color in Cannabis. So Mika, would you like to start?
Sure, absolutely. So my name is Mika Brown. I'm the general manager of Mellow Fellows, Mellow Dispensary up in Haverhill, Massachusetts. Also the owner, founder for Babes Handmade, an all-natural body butter skincare company. And I am currently a level 3 apprentice at Sacred Vibes Apothecary in Brooklyn, New York. I love cannabis. That's that, you know. That's it.
Okay, and Dion?
Hi folks, I'm Dion Carroll. I was an engineer with higher yields, kind of going in a bit of a different direction there now. But basically my background is with helping with operational and process and some of the product lifecycle consulting within the cannabis industry, as well as several other industries. So yeah, cannabis is my passion and why I got my engineering degree. So really just happy to be here.
Yes, and we're happy to have you, ladies. So as we mentioned, both Dion and Mika were speakers in previous sessions. Dion is a rock star. She's probably been a speaker for about 2 to 3 sessions. Correct me if I'm wrong. She's super knowledgeable, so we definitely wanted to have her join us for this overview. And the same thing for Mika. I mean, she pretty much carried our retail discussion, super knowledgeable on the internal, hiring process, but also external and customer facing, how to make sure that, clientele and customers and patients are being educated properly. So we have a lot to discuss. So let's start with our presentation, Ashley. Okay, so just to give you guys an overview, and Ashley, feel free to jump in whenever you're ready. This is kind of the loose agenda for today. We wanted to make sure that we were able, like we said, to cover our 4 previous sessions. So we're going to talk about career opportunities across those 4 avenues. So once again, compliance, cultivation, retail, and manufacturing. We're also going to talk about, some of the job descriptions, how they might appear if you see any open opportunities posted, but also what the day-to-day job is going to look like. Something that I remember that Mika said that was so profound is that if you're signing up for a retail job, but greater implications, if you're going to work anywhere in cannabis, you need to know what the day-to-day is going to look like. And are you going to be happy doing that day-to-day? Because it might sound in theory something you're really excited about, and then you realize you're lifting 40 pounds of packaged and zipped weed, and you're not excited about that. But then we're also going to talk about the qualifications. We're going to talk about transferable skills as well, because something that I believe Dion said is in one of our sessions is the cannabis industry is a new industry. There is no classic bullet points or check boxes that you need to hit. You can really get creative in marketing yourself and your past experiences. So we're going to kind of tie up the conversation, letting you guys know what keywords you can use, how you can sell past experiences to current experiences. So Ashley, do we want to start with the possible career opportunities?
Yeah, so let me just get us to our next slide. Apologies here. All right, so we are going to start off with working in compliance. Some of the job opportunities in compliance, just to get your memory jogged if you were joining us for our first session, but inventory specialist, compliance associate, compliance manager, and director of compliance. So those are some of our high level jobs that you might see in the industry. But to that point, and Mika, you might be able to speak about this, but inventory isn't only just in necessarily the compliance department, but you'll have that also in retail. Inventory specialists won't only be in retail, but manufacturing and also possibly cultivation. Do you want to talk about that, Mika, and how you see inventory specialists working in the retail sector of the cannabis industry?
Sure. I can talk about inventory specialists. I can also talk about the compliance part and the whole operational structure of a dispensary. The most common person that you'll see that's in compliance is, the inventory specialist, and that's the person who's checking in the product, making sure that what was sent to us is what we have, making sure that it's labeled properly, that the customers can also know what it is that they have. Dispensary weed is a gift to us because we have the opportunity to know what's in it. And so that is what the inventory specialists are doing. They're transferring the product from the wholesaler to the dispensary, and their job is to make sure that what you see is what you get, is what's on the label. There's a lot that goes into making sure that that happens, and that's where your compliance officer or compliance manager is going to come into play. And that person's job is really tasked with knowing the regs, knowing when the regs change, knowing when the regs change back, and really, making sure that they take that information from your regulatory body, decipher it, and distribute it amongst the team. So one of the other really important places that compliance is very important is your operations, how the building is secured, how many cameras, do you have cameras in the right place? How many people are in the building at one time? That was a big one during COVID. Was how many, do we have enough in this room? Wait a minute, don't take any more. We played this game on the radios all day, making sure we had enough people in the building, but not too many, and not too many folks standing in line. My operations manager is not just my compliance director, but they really know everything in the building that you can and cannot do for the entire facility. And that is super duper important. You want to make sure that there is someone that knows who's who and what's what, which company came to deliver, what time they came, how they get to where they need to go and how they get back off the property. It's really super duper detailed, and it requires someone who's extremely detailed oriented and almost like an event planner, like a super duper detailed event planner has to be the compliance director, because there's so many moving parts and it's overwhelming. I'm writing the job description, so I can tell you it's overwhelming.
Yeah, Mika, in addition to being detail oriented, what I hear there is that you also have to be a great communicator and communicate with many different people, those who are in retail. If you're vertically integrated, meaning that you have manufacturing and cultivation as well as retail, you're going to be communicating with those different departments. and also with regulatory bodies, and potentially even law enforcement, because that all falls into compliance. In addition to being a good communicator and being detail oriented, Dion, is there other things that you like to see for a person applying for a role in compliance?
Well, I suppose it does go pretty hand in hand with the details, but being able to understand data management from a high level, because you do have a lot of working pieces coming into, just a batch, where that harvest was coming from, the testing behind that. Perhaps you were getting it supplied from another company and things of that nature. So making sure that there is end-to-end traceability, you're playing a really big role within that. And there are a lot of, I suppose, hands that go into the success of those the transfers and handoff of that information. So being able to, I suppose, showcase yourself and being an individual that is detail oriented, a great communicator, but able to understand and help with the processes of tracking and tracing data. I think that is also fairly helpful. And I guess you can't really stress enough how important from a operations side, those SOPs, those operating procedures, just making sure that those are properly detailed as well as rolled out to your teams, in order for everybody to, stay compliant. Because if there is a drop in the chain, sometimes we are only as strong as our weakest link. And I've seen situations where one thing drops, even just clerical, and there's been some really big repercussions there. So just being that individual that can, I suppose, keep an eye out for that can be very valuable to a team and organization.
Yeah, that's awesome. So also a great problem solver, detail oriented, data analytics, problem solver, great communicator. Those are some keywords that I might look
Risk
for
mitigation.
on a resume. What is it?
Risk mitigation.
Risk mitigation. Yes, that too. Those are all great keywords to put on your resume if you're interested in a career in compliance. And another question before we move on, I wanted to ask, have you seen over the past 6 or 7 months since we last had our compliance workshop, have you seen the roles or the requirements that people are hiring? Have you seen those job descriptions change or the requirements change over the past 6 or so months?
I can definitely say that we are past kind of the first generation of the cannabis industry, especially here in Massachusetts. We're kind of like, there's enough of us in the industry that have been working in it long enough that we can we're kind of rewriting the script. We're taking those first SOPs that existed and we're saying, we know this doesn't work and we know that doesn't work. And you don't want to do curbside this way. We have kind of figured out we still figured out what does work, but we know what doesn't work. And so the approach and the shift to the jobs are changing. What we now kind of know what we want in an employee. There's still room for growth, but we can pin down that people who have these skills match this job. And so with regard to compliance, the biggest thing that I've learned is not to give so much responsibility to one person with regard to compliance and operations, that it's more of a team and it's a nuanced space. There's the security part of compliance. There's the inventory portion of compliance, and then there's the actual store part of compliance, and those are all 3 different wheelhouses. And so the best thing that I've learned is to have someone who's super detailed and knows how to manage a team, but to also have folks who have strong suits in those particular spaces. So if you have a retail background and you're super duper oriented, you've worked at Filene's or Macy's or, the Gap, and you're super duper detailed, you might be good at compliance just for the store aspect. And if you've done security, you know how to watch security cameras and that sort of thing, you would be good in that part of compliance. So that's the shift that I myself have experienced and am encouraging, because giving so much work to one person or to two people, it could be a total detriment to your location. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I suppose you don't necessarily want single points of failure, but compliance is totally a team effort. But from my standpoint, I suppose some of the things that I've been seeing change, kind of from a job description standpoint within cannabis, or at least opportunities. People have been, or organizations have been a little bit more strategic on their, I suppose, branding, as well as how are we keeping our customers safe. So I've been seeing a few different, I suppose, like financial institutions coming into the cannabis industry, helping develop like text to pay systems and things like that. So there's a little bit of I guess, more opportunity from like the software and e-commerce side of things, which I think is really interesting, because we clearly can utilize technology and a lot of things that are fairly successful in other industries and clearly transfer them over into cannabis. It's something that I clearly harp on all the time. But on top of that, just being able to adopt those processes and being strategic enough to understand what's going to be valuable and what's not going to be valuable, especially in the days of, a pandemic, where you do have to keep people safe, but you do still want to be able to serve your customers. I mean, we're looking at licenses rolling out for delivery in a few different states. So there are opportunities there to become those delivery drivers, or even bike couriers in some places. So being able to understand how the industry is shifting is fairly interesting. But like you are seeing that expansion in skill sets in a couple of different places. So if you happen to be a driver, or you do Uber and things like that on a regular basis, there could be opportunities for you to be able to get into the delivery side of things, but you do still need to be able to understand compliance completely, or at least when it comes to that aspect, because you are transferring product. So there's a few different with COVID and the way that companies and regulatory agencies are shifting in order to adapt to it, there are, I suppose, more opportunities that are branching out, as well as companies looking for individuals that know how to be strategic enough to help coach them along with being successful to adopt those new processes.
Yeah, I would say also I've noticed that some of the job descriptions are also asking for more years of experience. That's what I'm starting to see shape. And so I think, Dion, you have dropped some great keywords here just during this session, but using those keywords to really describe some of the experience, like Mika, you were talking about, you in your cover letter and on your resume will help to really solidify, like, I do have that experience. It might not be directly in the cannabis industry, but I have experience and I have all of these skills. And I have years of this experience, years of data entry or risk mitigation that can be directly relatable to the industry. So I think using those transferable skills will be even more important as we see the industry start to mature. And I'm going to move ahead here because compliance is, of course, part of every single part of the industry, but it does start with the plant as well, right? The plant is really why we have the industry, the cannabis plant. And so, Dion, I know you and Sammy really took lead on the working in cultivation session, and just to highlight some of those jobs that we talked about in the cultivation session, we have your cultivation agent, harvesters, trimmers, cultivation leads, IPM technicians, cultivation assistant managers, cultivation managers, the director of cultivation. So there are a lot of different job opportunities in this industry. And starting with the question we left off on, have you seen any of these roles or descriptions change over the past 6 months?
Well, I suppose there has been some detail with, just being able to continue. I think people are getting the idea of being able to be a little bit more commercial oriented, or at least detailing whether they want to be commercial oriented or boutique oriented. But I have also been seeing a lot more, I suppose, skill set, or the requests for skill sets in quality. So just being able to understand things from a high level of quality, and again, helping out with those standard operating procedures, being a team player with working with your compliance managers as well as your cultivation directors in order to, I suppose, marry your production schedules with your actual regulations. That's kind of where I've been seeing some folks ask for, how do we do this? How do we do this well? Especially because in some cases, or in some places, we still have some markets that, markets that aren't necessarily as mature. So still, you might have co-ops that are popping up and still trying to figure out, okay, how are we going to properly utilize the values that we really care about within the cannabis industry, whether that be their cultivation methods or the genetics that they're using, things of that nature. How are they going to be able to really get that into a changing market, as well as an agricultural production that is somewhat commercialized? That's where I'm seeing individuals kind of say, who do we need in order to be successful there? What type of skill sets do we need in order to do something like that? So I've even had someone actually just recently have requests on, okay, do you know somebody that can help out with writing standard operating procedures on utilizing live soil, which is actually a pretty, it's not something that you find all the time and everywhere. So it seems like we are still trying to find, I suppose, those standards, and but still utilizing the values and what we really started off with, and like the passions that that's driving the cannabis industry. But how are we marrying them and keeping them both within this, I suppose, unique industry that we're building out for ourselves? So that's kind of what I've been seeing over the last like 6 months to a year, really.
Would you be able to describe the typical job duties of someone working in cultivation, like a cultivation agent or harvester?
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, if we're talking about from the ground level, you're taking care of plants. You're basically, you need to be able to, and it's also taking care of plants in a sometimes warehouse setting, if we're talking about indoor grows, or you might be working on a farm to some degree, a farm type of setting to some degree. So if we're talking about the outdoor cultivation. So in those cases, you're getting your hands dirty, and you're definitely going to be considered a bit of a laborer. Sometimes lifting soil, washing out pots. It's not always about just being around and trimming the leaves out of the plants. There's a lot that actually goes into keeping up a cultivation. So it can be a little laborsome. On top of that, just depending on the size of the cultivation that you're working within, you might be working with hand watering or automated watering systems. So there might be a variance in the complexity of the technologies that you're working with. You might be working with a HVAC system that turns on and turns off properly, or you could be somewhere where it's a little bit more, advanced, where I'm seeing people being able to turn things up and down with apps from their phones now. On top of that, again, looking at the size, you might be riding around on those little four-wheelers throughout a farm, or perhaps even operating a forklift within a tiered cultivation. So there's a couple of those duties that are that you have opportunities for too. So if you happen to be forklift certified, you might want to keep an eye out for something like that. Let's see what else. Getting into other processes, there's like the hanging and drying of cannabis. So being able to take care of plants in certain degrees, and just being able to maintain the quality and integrity of the plant. So again, it goes, there's that aspect of it within plant health, but there's also that aspect of it afterwards. So you want to make sure that you're not creating an environment for mold within your facility. So being that individual in charge of dry rooms is going to be important. Understanding the environmental requirements there is fairly important. And then again, keeping up the integrity of the plant, getting into being a trimmer and things of that nature. Sometimes we call them manicurists, depending on like the quality or the level of the level of shelf that we might be putting the product on. So there's a lot of hands, as Ashley previously mentioned, that goes into a cultivation and really getting that plant from a seed or clone all the way to a packaged good. So even at that point, from a packaging aspect, where I did a lot of work in, there's a lot with keeping up the integrity of the plant. I mean, even from a wholesale perspective, you don't even want to be, I suppose, packaging large bags that might be crushing your product. So being able to work with machinery, or like the vacuum sealers that do something like that, or just like even small, hand presses, but there's a lot of handwork and labor that goes into working with the cultivation, because it's literally passing off basically the plant from one cycle or phase to another, from one group to another. And all of those handoffs, they're important. They require touches, they require data to be transferred back and forth. So there's a lot that goes into cultivation, but there's a lot of positions clearly that go into it as well.
One of the things that I love that you were speaking about is how the cultivation facilities look so different, right? Indoor versus outdoor, high tech versus more hands-on. And so I think it's very important that if someone's looking for a job in the cultivation industry, that maybe they do some research about the company, because some individuals might like to have more contact with the plant versus using a lot of technology, whereas others might be really interested in using that technology during the growth cycle, or during that cultivation process. Some of the keywords I kind of heard you say: plant health, that's very important. But I also noticed that individuals in cultivation have to also be detail oriented and have pay a lot of attention, because variations in things like temperature, light, humidity can actually affect the plant and can significantly affect the plant and the final product. So having that attention to detail is important. One thing I always like to bring up is, your safety in the workplace. You're talking about working with a lot of equipment. You have to be safe when handling that equipment. And so employers should be providing training for handling that equipment. But we also want to be mindful of personal protective equipment, working with very bright lights and having eye protection so that you're not exposed to those bright cultivation lights. You'll want to have gloves when handling at the plant, not only to protect the plant, but to protect your skin from some of those terpenes that can cause irritation to the skin. Are there other PPE or personal protective equipment that a potential job seeker should make sure that they're paying attention to if they're going on a tour of the facility?
Well, I mean, I think clearly in the day and age of COVID, masks have been popular, but it's actually something that you definitely want to see available at a facility because some individuals can be sensitive to not only the plant, but the products being utilized around the facility. So if you are like a IPM technician, you just want to make sure that you have the proper PPE to protect yourselves from any exposure there. But yeah, I think you hit it really on the head. Just ensuring that you can be safe, or at least empowered with the necessary safe equipment, and training is important. I mean, I think in some cases, all cultivation, in Colorado, like all cultivation facility employees do need some form of handling training when it comes to pesticides and things of that nature. The level of such tends to vary, but just being aware of the chemicals around you and what's at your facility is pretty important. Because there can be some really harsh things out there, like just some of the hydrogen chloride and things of that nature that they use for cleaning, even just to sterilize things. So just make sure that wherever you are applying for a position, they are aware of those and taking the necessary precautions.
Do you see a difference when you're looking at like a mature market, such as Colorado, and a more immature market, some of the ones that are coming online? Do you see a difference in the job descriptions and what they're looking for in potential employees?
In some cases, yes. Some places you have, I suppose, operators coming from other states that are mature. But if you've got operators that are kind of just springing up for the first time, a lot of times they don't know what they don't know. So it also is a great opportunity to speak up if you do see a bit of a gap there. But yeah, sometimes I do see some, within like not necessarily mature markets, they aren't necessarily looking for as detailed compliance or even I suppose a lot of experience within certain positions, simply because like they are not necessarily expecting to see all of that experience within their local areas, though that they are reaching out to, I suppose some places they're reaching out to the individuals that do know and trying to get that information and trying to, I suppose, better solidify their job descriptions. But there tends to be a bit of a gap, I've noticed.
Do you see any specific transferable skills or careers that people are transferring from directly into the cultivation sector of the cannabis industry?
I mean, like I said before, you see it's in some cases it's kind of like warehouse work. So it's a really big transfer there, as well as farm work. So if you've worked on a farm or some form of like a nursery or something like that, I think we've mentioned these previously in the former sessions, but yeah, those have a lot of transferable skills. Not necessarily when it comes to like the regulatory aspect of it, but that can be taught as long as you are an individual that is detail oriented and can help with the success of the plant. So yeah, I think yeah, when you're looking at even previous let's see, like if you've worked in a grocery store, or even one of those larger grocery stores like Costco or something of that nature, there's the inventory aspect, there's the cycling aspect. I know in some cases we have to be considerate of first in, first outs. Yeah, just being able to work as a team player and work with the rest of the cultivation, that's definitely going to be, it's going to add to the success of your career within a cultivation.
And before we transition, do you have any last piece of advice for those who are looking to get into the cultivation industry and maybe those who have no experience in agriculture or working with plants?
Yeah, so I suppose you don't necessarily, as we've kind of been saying, you don't necessarily need to previously work with plants hands-on, but perhaps understanding certain cycles or being able to pitch yourself as being detail-oriented, pitch yourself as being a team player. I mean, in a lot of these cases, or in a lot of places, culture and team culture is really important. And in some places, they believe that that can affect their plant. So you want to be able to be a team player. You do want to be able to pitch yourself as somebody that is detail oriented as well as hardworking and able to get the job done, because if the work's not done at the end of the day, you know, at 5 o'clock, and all the plants aren't watered, well, they're not going to necessarily wait until the next day. So being able to pitch yourself as saying, someone that's saying that they will take care of the plants and I suppose give dedication where it's needed, to a degree, clearly, because we do want to take care of ourselves, but to be able to make sure that you're taking care of the plant and letting your employer or interviewer know that, that's going to help your chances with getting that position.
Yes, yes, happy plants that are well taken care of. I love all those keywords and how we can really strategically pitch ourselves on our resumes and cover letters so that we are given an opportunity to enter into the industry, no matter where we're coming from, no matter what our background is. Mika, I know cultivation might not be your specialty, but you're getting those plants. I mean, you're getting those in retail. And so we're going to transition now into working in retail, and what some of those job duties look like, and what some of those jobs are and what we're looking for when hiring. And just to recap some of the job positions that might be available: your bud tender or retail agents, assistant managers, retail managers, regional managers. Do you want to talk about those job descriptions and what working in retail, the average day might look like?
Absolutely. As you guys know, I manage the dispensary Mellow up in Haverhill, Massachusetts, and prior to that, I managed Pure Oasis in Boston. And I had the opportunity with both of these projects to come in at the beginning. With Pure Oasis, I came in at the final license point. So I was there when we were setting up the store, getting everything ready for our final license. And at that point, I was just working in the inventory department, and I was an inventory supervisor. And so it was really my job to stay on top of all the audits and make sure that everything that we said we got is what we had. That was crazy. I never seen that much, anything this big in my life. It was super duper incredible experience. Excuse me. And then after that, I became assistant general manager and general manager. And then I was really supervising everyone in the store. And what that taught me was to look for diverse skills in people that they don't even necessarily know they had. So it taught me to look beyond the resume that was in front of me and to ask other questions like, what did you do when you were in college? Did you support yourself? Did you work in a retail establishment? Well, tell me about that, because people don't even know what skills work. Some of the positions that you might find in the dispensary, the most infamous one is the bud tender. And everyone wants that job because that's the job where everyone gets to show off their skills of knowing strains and terpenes and knowledge. But there's so much more to that position. You have to have cash management skills. You have to know how to manage money. You have to know how to use the inventory system, the POS inventory system, to make sure that what you're saying you're selling is actually what you sold. You have to know how to use a credit card terminal. There's so many different aspects to being a bud tender. So it's not just telling everyone about the weed. It's actually selling them the weed. We've just been doing handoffs to our guy for so long, but now that we're in a regulatory industry, there's a whole lot of buttons to push on multiple different types of devices because, banking is really difficult in cannabis. So to be a bud tender takes a lot more than just having cannabis knowledge. It's those other soft retail skills that people who work at the Gap take for granted. My Gap Inc. skills kicked in really hardcore when I started working at Pure Oasis. And I hadn't done any of that for years. I had put myself through college doing retails. It all just came back to me lickety split. One of the other infamous positions that everybody wants to work in is the inventory department. Everybody wants to be with the weed. And then I hand them some scrubs and they're like, I gotta wear that? And I'm like, yeah. Yeah, you have to cover your head. Yeah, you have to, cover your beard. Yes, you have to, wear Crocs. Like I've had some real hardcore dudes look at me like, y'all don't even have my size. And I'm like, yes, I have your size. If you want to work here, this is what you have to wear in the inventory department. You also have to be really good at counting. Like that is a skill. I have taken some people and just moved them to other departments because counting is so important. And if you get caught up after 17, then that's not it for you. You know what I mean? And then I have some people that are really great who can visually look at something and say, that's 10 and that's 11. Those are the people who work really well in the inventory department. People who can stand on their feet for a long time. No one sits down in the inventory department. You're always moving around. You're picking up boxes of, it doesn't come to us, contrary to belief. We're not getting these big, huge colas behind the wall in the dispensary. People have these wild, infamous ideas of what's going on behind the curtain. No, we get cannabis in containers and we have to inventory it and count it. And we have to make sure that everything is labeled correctly. We have to make sure that, they sent us GG4 and we don't have GG44. We have to make sure that all of our dispensary information is on the package. We have to confirm with our inventory system, the wholesaler's inventory system, and Metric, which is a regulatory body. We have to make sure that all three of those things match. That is really hard to do when everything is about the size of your hand. So that's a really important position, and you really have to find people that you trust and people who have the skills that I just listed. And then there's the operations department. One of the things that I quickly understood was that I may have known how to work an iPad, but I did not know how to work the TVs that have all the great logos and marketing and all the items that communicated, all the media that communicated information in the store. I didn't know how to use that stuff. I needed to find someone who spoke 1100, could code, could make this computer talk to that screen and that speaker play that screen. Like, there's someone who has to actually make sure that everything is functioning, that the lights are on, that the doors are going to open, that, you know, knows all of the manuals for everything that we use in the store. You know, that's like your uncle who can fix the TV by banging on it. You know, that person who's really good at fixing things, or, you know, just managing things, managing the facility. What that looks like is someone who works in operations, someone who, you know, maybe they worked in janitorial services prior to this. Maybe they worked in facilities management. Maybe they worked in a whole, like a big giant wholesale facility. You know, that looks like someone who's worked in a warehouse, shipping products to all over the world, all over the country. Those are folks that we need in these positions. Those are skill sets. You know, someone who knows how to work POS systems, some folks who are really good with computers, as my Nana would say. You good with computers, you'll always get a job. And it's so true, because someone like me who, like, I flunked Excel, I flunked everything computer, you know, I need someone on my team who's really strong with media and just has an online digital savvy. So those are some of the baseline positions. Ashley, did you want me to talk about some of the managerial positions?
Yeah, absolutely. Like retail, being a retail manager, or even a regional manager. But before we go on to that, I just want to read, Dion put in the chat, IT can play a big role when it comes to those POS and ERP systems. Absolutely. And what I find in the industry, depending on what your background is, but one of the biggest learning curves is the technology that is used in the industry. And that is because it is heavily regulated. How regulated it is, it might vary based on where you are. Massachusetts, we know, is very regulated, but being out in California, we might not see those same intense regulations out there. So as we're speaking, just keep in mind, Mika's coming from Massachusetts, where we're heavily regulated. So being very detail oriented is extremely important, because if you're off by one pre-roll, you have to absolutely report that to the CCC. So the Cannabis Control Commission, who regulates us here in Massachusetts. But yes, IT and technology is very important. And if you have that skill set, put that on your resume. It will definitely light up your resume if you are familiar with even using things like Excel, Microsoft, or if you have advanced IT skills, like things in cybersecurity too. Those are all very important, and it can be used in any sector of the industry. But I'll let you get onto the management roles, like retail managers and regional managers, and what those roles might look like, and what are some of the transferable skills to help someone get a career as a retail or regional manager.
So a retail manager, it's really important. What a lot of people don't understand is that there's a lot of behind the scenes work to put on the best face of the dispensary. You know, you want to be able to go on your phone and see what we have in the store. And that requires me to send my menu, my information, to Weed Maps, to Leafly, to I Heart Jane, to Dutchie, to all of those different folks. And so there is someone in the background that is managing all of that. Like, it's so detailed oriented, and it's communicating with those vendors, I Heart Jane, Leafly, Dutchie, Weed Maps, while also communicating with the vendors who we wholesale with. So that's all of the cultivation spaces that supply us with cannabis. Because we're a standalone, we're not vertically integrated. So we take products from everywhere. Well, not everywhere, in Massachusetts, because I can't get stuff from California. I mean, I love when folks come in and they're like, you don't have that Carlos Santana brand? No, I can't get the Carlos Santana brand. You can't get cookies? No, I don't have any Gary Payton. Get out of here, So it's really interesting to have those conversations. But the retail manager is really the person who is establishing relationships with wholesalers, getting those wholesalers to come and demo their products in our stores. They are also talking with our our partners, our marketing partners, iHeart Jane, Leafly, Dutchie. They're managing the team, so they're creating schedules. They're making sure everyone is getting paid. They're making sure that the store is merchandised properly, that we have accessories to sell, that customers know what's good, what terpenes are, helping the bud tenders with all of that education that they need to give the information to the customers. They're really in charge of your customer experience. And there are so many layers to that, as I've just explained. In my store, in terms of management, we have the dispensary manager, the retail manager, the operations manager. And as I said before, that's the person who's managing the facility, the security, whatever your building looks like. We are a building that sits on land. So my ops manager is not just responsible for the building, but outside of the building. We also have the inventory manager, and that's the person who supervises the whole inventory department. So they know what's coming in. They're creating the menu with the retail manager. They're creating schedules for their team. They're in charge of talking to Metric when there's a problem, talking to FlowHub, which is our POS system, talking to them when there's a problem. There's multiple different levels of management inside of the dispensary. When you get to, say, operations manager or regional manager, that's someone who's really in charge of the locations and the programming that's happening at the locations. That's someone who's making sure that the marketing and the branding is cohesive across locations, across a region. That's someone who's really taking advantage of the dispensaries, working with the community that it sits in, and making sure that they're running programming that works with the community. They're reaching out to nonprofit organizations within the community and making those connections. Cannabis is attempting to be a really socially responsible industry. And so a lot of the work that I do is starting to work with the community and find ways and tie-ins that we can work with them to really spread the knowledge and get out of the face of the stigma that's attached to it. So a lot of my work personally is with education, getting people to be okay with cannabis, really exposing to the community to all the positives of the cannabis experience. I could go on and on, Ashley. So you got to tell me, you got to give me them 2 minutes, girl.
Yeah, I think we can, wrap this up with just what are some of the keywords you'd like to see on the resume? Because we have one more sector to wrap up before we talk about, the cover letter and transferable skills in detail. But for retail, what are some of those keywords that you want to see on a resume?
Organize, I like to see folks who are very detailed oriented. The regulations and the compliance follow you throughout the store. Even though there's a compliance director, everyone needs to check, double check, and triple check whatever their job is. You need to be very, very sure. So it's not necessarily keywords that I see on the resume, but it's also what presents to me. If you present to me that you are confident and you trust yourself, I'm gonna know that. This industry takes people who are really, really, really sure about what they're doing. The only way you get to be really sure about what you're doing is by double checking and triple checking, measure twice, cut once. So I'm looking for detailed oriented folks who had those jobs where you get into the intricacies. I'm looking for someone who is very happy, someone who's got a really good spirit to them. And I'm looking for someone who enjoys what they do. So people who can find joy in what they do. So I know you asked me about keywords, but I kind of went into the person because you can almost train anyone to do anything. If you have good training, you can do the job. But you have to have some kind of grown-up skills, some confidence and willingness to learn to really make it in this industry.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that you see the person. Some of the larger companies might not have the ability to really read every resume and cover letter and see the person, but I love that you see the individual and you read between the lines and see what they're capable of. And one of the things I got from when you were talking, if I want to look cute at work, I should be a retail agent or a bud tender. Otherwise, I might be with that PPE and, but yeah, if I want to look cute, I'll be a retail agent.
Yeah, if you come into work, you doing your hair, you putting a little lipstick on, you want to work in the front. My first day at work, y'all know how I roll. I came to work and then they was like, girl, you got to put that thing on I was like, on this, do you know how much work it took for me to get to this? You want me to cover that? No, baby, I can't. That's how I ended up being a general manager, because I couldn't stay in the back.
On the contrary, underneath some of those scrubs and like cultivation and things of that nature, you might see folks in pajama pants or ripped jeans, so you can be a little bit more comfortable there.
Yes, true. So there's the pros and cons everywhere. And if you're having like one of those off days, right, where you're like, I'm not doing my hair, I don't want to do my makeup, working in cultivation or working in the inventory where you're all in your scrubs and in your hair nets, it might be worth it. You don't have to look cute every day, but just some things to think about. If you like fashion and you like showing up to work with your hair done, retail, even some of the other roles, most likely going to be in that PPE, especially in manufacturing. There's not really any way around it. You're going to be all dolled up in PPE or personal protective equipment when you're working in manufacturing. I know Mika and Dion, you weren't speakers in our manufacturing sections, but I'm sure you have a lot to add about manufacturing. For this particular manufacturing session, we focused on the infusion or finished goods sides of it and not necessarily the extraction side. So we were focusing on some of the job titles that include your production associate, packaging associate, production supervisors, director of production. But do you want to share, and Dion or Mika, you can feel free to share, what do you think, or what have you seen is the day-to-day working in manufacturing on that infusion or finished goods side, like making pre-rolls?
Dion, you want to go?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitely. I suppose you do need to be focused on the PPE. You might be working with some form of machinery. If it's pre-rolls, there are some tabletop fillers, but there are also more, I suppose, advanced machinery, machine types that package those goods. Also, I suppose if we're talking about the infusion side of things, you might be working in a kitchen or kind of in a bit of a food and beverage type of role, like filling bottles with infused, some of those, new infused drinks that they have nowadays. So being able to perhaps work in some of those positions. Actually, one of my former employees has kind of been going back and forth between like Coca-Cola, some of the cannabis companies, as well as Coors and things of that nature, just because she has those transferable skills of operating those filling machines, as well as operating the machines in some of the larger manufacturing organizations. So you do have some of those transferable skills there. But sometimes I do see these as more so cleaner room areas, because of you are working with those types of consumable goods. And that's going to be important to be detail oriented with those types of dietary standards.
On a smaller scale, where I've seen manufacturing done at the dispensary level, is some dispensaries take in products wholesale. So that's product that hasn't been packaged. It's not coming to us prepackaged. It's coming to us in what we call bulk. And so that allows us to take that product and brand it with our dispensary name, and it usually sells at a slightly less price. So that's where, our inventory department will take the product, put it in, and I know I'm telling secrets, put it in our packaging, seal it up, and then label it and send it out. And what happens is you're left with trim, you're left with small buds, you're left with popcorn. And so what will happen is they will, I'm telling secrets, they will manufacture pre-rolls. Those are called in-house manufactured pre-rolls. And you put the product in the pre-roll, and you put it in the packaging, and you label it, and voila. Now said dispensary has something that they can brand, that they can usually sell at a lower price. And that's really taking advantage of all of the materials that is sent to you. So that is manufacturing at a much smaller scale level that is happening in dispensaries across the country, actually. So yeah, I mean, the other place where I can talk about manufacturing is in my own business, where I make body butters. And so the level of protective equipment that I have to use is astonishing, and cleaning and making sure all the materials are sanitized properly is so important. So I have never actually, outside of packaging and making pre-rolls, I have never worked inside of a kitchen, but I know folks who have kitchen skills, any kitchen skills, they are transferable. Like the folks that I work with that came from the restaurant industry knew exactly how to go in. They weren't mad that they had to wear scrubs. They were actually content. They were hands-on and ready to go. They knew exactly what I meant when I said take inventory. So folks who have worked in the restaurant industry, particularly behind the scenes in the kitchen, folks who have been bus boys, bus girls, those folks are handy because they understand the level of cleanliness that needs to be had. And they're not afraid to be behind the scenes. And, they don't show up like, well, what do I do? They know exactly what to do. In terms of, upper level management, those are the folks that are ordering supplies. Those are folks that are making sure that you have all of the ingredients that you need to manufacture whatever it is, chocolate bars, edibles, gummies, the packaging for your concentrates, all of your labels. That's what those folks are doing at that level. They're making sure not only are they managing schedules, not only are they making sure that the product is actually getting made properly, but they're also making sure that everyone has what they need in the facility to create the products. I hope that was helpful.
Yes, absolutely. And so just to kind of detail some of the different sectors that you might see, like you mentioned, working in a kitchen. So if you're infusing things for ingestion, like your edibles, gummies, chocolate bars, cookies, you're going to be working in an industrial style kitchen. The equipment that you're working with will vary based on the size of the kitchen that you're working in. Some of the processes might be very automated, while other processes might be more hands-on. So that'll depend on, where you're looking to work in. However, sanitation is going to be required. You're going to have good personal sanitation, knowing how to wash your hands appropriately. Some places might require that men keep their beards trimmed back or wear a beard net to protect hair from going into the product. Women are going to have to keep their hair up, or anyone with long hair will have to keep their hair up and covered in a hairnet. And that's just to protect the product from contamination. And you're going to have good sanitation skills, changing your gloves frequently when working between different products, working with raw goods versus working with cooked goods. And a lot of that comes from working in a kitchen. So if you have any experience, if you were a chef in a kitchen, if you worked as a prep cook in a kitchen, a lot of that is directly relatable to working in the infusion industry, where you're going to work with edible product. The other sectors that we might see in manufacturing, and that infusing stuff like you were saying, Mika, body butters, lotions, topicals. Those might look more like your traditional manufacturing facilities, and of course, personal protective equipment will be required for all individuals, not only to help protect the product from contamination that might come from us, but also protect us from any potential chemicals that we're working with in the industry. And another sector that we might see are infusion of things like tablets, pills, suppositories, and that might look more like pharmaceutical manufacturing. And so that might have an even more stringent level of personal protective equipment and sanitation practices. And yes, as Anne says, the GMP standards, a lot of those in the industry are moving towards those standards. Packaging, although we did include it in this particular section for manufacturing, as you can see, that's happening in other areas as well, in cultivation and also in retail. And what I wanted to actually focus on this section, and thank you, Anne, for bringing up that GMP, but I wanted to talk a little bit about, the potential for federal legalization. And if we do become federally legalized, how do you see particularly the manufacturing industry changing, and as far as, those job descriptions and requirements to get the job, and that ties into having good manufacturing practices in the industry? Do you see that they might start looking for people, or they already are looking for individuals that have a pharmaceutical background or have a background in GMP?
Yes. If I could chime in there, absolutely. Just some of the job descriptions that I've seen recently, you might be looking for someone with a PhD, you might be looking for someone that's done certain types of pharmaceutical formulations before. Just being able to work in that type of lab setting is definitely helpful, but they're definitely going towards federal legalization. I definitely see more so of being able to adopt certain standards, as well as, just like GMP, but as well as looking for those individuals with a specific type of skill set. So just being able to understand that, the certain people might be like Safe Serve certified or something like that. Having those certain skills are going to be necessary. And I'd imagine the regulatory agencies might be a little bit more stringent as to yeah, what they're asking of companies. So we need to be able to adhere to those. So I'd imagine there might be some sort of stringencies when we're talking about some of those formalizations, but still looking at some of our more so kitchen types of roles. I've definitely seen executive chefs in some places be like a fairly successful here. You know, people that are able to work within some of those like more so production line types of roles there. When, yeah, just working on tight schedules where you're pushing out a lot of inventory product. But yeah, I think when we're looking at going federally legalized, we can look at some of these other industries that are already existing, like the pharmaceutical, food and beverage, things of that nature. So I think that's something to keep an eye on. Even the alcohol industry, kind of how they source some of their how they source some of their skill sets at different levels of the production line, and depending on where those products are going.
Mika, did you have anything to add as far as how you see GMP or those job descriptions changing as federal legalization looms over? And I draw this from the Cannabis Administration and Opportunity Act that was just a draft about how we might see federal legalization happen. And when I read that, one of the things I saw that I thought would the manufacturing industry would be greatly impacted if legalization happened that way, because we would see that GMP would be required. We would be regulated under agencies like the FDA, which would require, you know, more stringent protocols in manufacturing facilities. And so I've actually even already noticed some of these job descriptions are starting to change, where they are asking for more experience. Oh, do you have GMP experience, or do you have experience with environmental health and safety, and those sort of roles, working with things like hazard communications and how to handle chemicals properly. Do you see that now? And Dion, you already talked about you know, thinking about the future, but do you see that transition that's starting to happen now to prepare us for what's next?
I think a lot of people see federal legalization happening sooner rather than later. A lot of folks in the industry didn't, you know, we're all very skeptical. We didn't think it was happening. And then New York happened and that, you know, and I was like, whoa, it might happen. And with that being said, the men from the boys are being separated, so to speak. You know, the cream is rising to the top. People are adopting better practices just in general. You know, people know that once the FDA comes, once the government has figured out how it wants to regulate it, you can't get away with any of the shenanigans that happens across the board in cannabis. There will be a way to do it, and it will be universal across all of the states. And so once that happens, you won't really get away with saying that, you know, there's X and there's Y. You just won't get away with that anymore. You won't get away with sort of some of the vague standards that are available in certain states that, you know, wouldn't fly in Massachusetts. Like the things that California and Florida can do versus what Massachusetts can do are just wildly vast. And the people that are impacted the most are the patients, are the people who need cannabis the most to, you know, to heal them. You know, those are the folks that are impacted. And when you have such a variation of what can be sold and how it can be sold and who can sell it, that those folks are impacted. They're not, everyone is not getting the same care or the same attention or even the same product. So I think federal legalization is going to balance out the playing field. And with that is going to come a responsibility with these companies that they have to adopt universal standards. And so right off the bat, you know, when I started at Mellow Fellows several months ago, you know, when we sat down as a team, it was no nonsense. We have to do this. Everything has to be done above board. Everything, we might go legal next month, and then we'll be scrambling to figure out what federal legalization looks like. So let's like see what that would look like and start to adopt those standards now. So there is no scramble down the road. We don't know when it's gonna come, but when it comes, it's gonna come really fast, and you're not gonna have any choice but to adopt.
Companies need to prepare now, and I think some of them realize that they do, just by looking at some of, if you look at what's happening at some of the state levels, like a couple years ago in Oklahoma, they had a fairly easy way to obtain licensing, and darn near anybody with a heartbeat could get one. And then they started rolling out certain regulations where you needed to you know, implement actual testing in certain levels of testing, and you could only have your product within a certain range. And so many operations and licenses struggled with that, and you see that happening all over. So the smart operations and the organizations that see that, they plan for it. They understand that this is basically what we should be accounting for within the future, and just understanding that they need to you know, staff for it, and make sure that they do have the proper plans and be able to shift when necessary. I think those are definitely going to be the organizations that will remain successful after federal legalization. But yeah, the positions and what's required of those organizations as a whole, they're going to become more defined, as well as more standard. And yeah, we're definitely going to see a change from how things were, you know, from 10 years ago to now, to what that's going to look like 5 years from now, and 10 years from now, and even further in the future.
And I think that that preparation can also apply to those who are looking for jobs in the industry. If we want to get into the industry, we can get in now and, you know, become grandfathered in. So when those, you know, when more stringent requirements as regards to education or training or certifications that you have, when that starts to really become necessary, we can already be grandfathered in because we've been in the industry for so long. And on the same token, you know, if you are interested in getting into the industry, you can look at some of those certifications that are required in those more regulated industries like pharmaceutical or other manufacturing facilities. Get those certifications, and that will give you an edge in getting employment in the industry. But when it comes to this federal legalization, I think that although we're not there yet, and I think that, you know, there's going to be a day when it comes, and if we can be prepared, that'll be great, because if we can get in now, we can get grandfathered in and stay in the industry, and really be, you know, leading the path in what that federal legalization looks like. Right, so moving on to some of our transferable skills. Get in here. So what I'd like to do is, you know, just simply ask, what are transferable skills? We've been talking about those. And how do we know if we have transferable skills directly related to the cannabis industry?
I can start with that one because I'm the queen of transferable skills. I'm outside, guys, in case you didn't know. So the nature has decided to come for me. I'm getting it on all ends. The mosquitoes, everybody's coming. But anywho, some of you know that I was in law enforcement prior to getting into the cannabis industry. And prior to that, you know, I was in the music industry. And before that, you know, I did retail to put myself through college. And so all three of those things sound completely extreme and foreign to each other. But all of the marketing that I had to learn in the music industry and just being versatile and the event planning that I had to do in the music industry set me up for this. All of the POS management and just general management that I learned and customer service that I learned working in retail all those years, putting myself through college. Like I said, that Gap Inc. kicked in real quick, you know, the 5-minute meeting, just all of those skills that I wasn't really like trying to achieve or do anything with. I was just really trying to pay my bills. All of those skill sets came into play. And really the management skills and the regulations and the law that I had to learn in law enforcement, that's really what did it. It was so transferable. When I was switching over, I was just like, I'm gonna have to start all over. I'm gonna have to come in an entry-level position. I mean, and even when I applied at Pure Oasis, I was just trying to, you know, ring people up, you know, because that's what I thought I could do. But luckily for me, the folks that hired me were like, oh no, you have, you know, bookkeeping skills here, you have event planning here, you have so many years of management. All of this translates into running a dispensary. So you know, if you heard anything that I just said, bookkeeping, team management, event planning, marketing, all of those skills are necessary to run a dispensary. Nothing more I can say there.
Yeah, I guess I definitely have to agree. The industry has been built off of transferable skills. Because there's clearly no book for us to to really go off of. We have to look at under other industries, what's been successful, what's worked, what hasn't worked, and apply that. And the places and the people that have been able to do so well are the ones that are fairly successful. You know, I tell people I got my engineering degree to support the cannabis industry, but there's nothing considered to be a weed engineer. Basically, just being able to understand standards, be able to fill gaps, find gaps, and understand certain solutions from a very high to bottom level. That's what's been able to make me successful in this industry. But looking at, you know, and other individuals trying to get into this type of work, there are plethoras of skill sets that can be applied. You know, just looking at our chat here, you know, all of those more so higher, more intense skill sets, you know, looking into GMP and SAFE certified, or that's actually fairly easy to obtain, but understanding supply chain and logistics, you know, you can apply that here. I've been speaking with folks from, you know, doctors to filmmakers that have their place within the cannabis industry, but even individuals coming from the retail sector, just like Mika was saying, you can apply your skills here and you can do so in a very valuable and necessary way. There were so many times while managing a packaging facility, did I have to basically call back on the things that I did while I was the assistant manager of a pet store. And I know that sounds very different, but we're looking at inventory. We're keeping up the health of our inventory. You know, you're trying to give and create a certain value to your customers and things of that nature. So to be able to understand the value that you've taken from your previous position and the value that you've been able to apply to whoever you're serving, whoever that end customer was, whether that be another department or an actual consumer, look at that. Look at what you've been doing there. And I guarantee you can definitely apply that somewhere within the cannabis industry, because at the end of the day, we are kind of just manufacturing, quote unquote, a widget, which some people would say, though that's so high level because there's a lot that goes into it, because it also is medicine and things of that nature. But when we think about it from that aspect, you can really understand that there's a lot of handoffs, there's a lot of people and skill sets that are necessary in order to make this product safe, compliant, and get it to the right people at the right times. So you can definitely be one of those individuals that help out. That's all I gotta say.
You said so much there that I resonated with. I couldn't believe when I had started to manage the store that nothing that I had done in my 20s and 30s was what was relevant. It was all of the work that I had done in my teenage and young adult years that I went back on. I was the first person in the whole dispensary to say first in, first out, people. And they were just like, what do you mean? And I'm like, we can't sell the weed based upon our favorite strain or what's testing the highest, or oh, my man's likes that, so I'm gonna put that on the menu. No, we can't do that. We have to sell it according to what came in first. and we have to make the inventory room flow that way. And everyone was like, yo, this girl is crazy. We can't sell the lotion. That's the first thing we got. So we have to put it on the menu. Guess what? It has an expiration date on it. And, I got that knowledge when, I was just a scooper. I was a supervisor at an ice cream shop here in Boston. Most of you guys might know JP Licks, but I was, a floor supervisor there. And that's how we did things, first by date, first in, first out. And I was absolutely shocked that it was those skills that I fell back on, and not all of that college educated that I'm still spending too much money on. All that information, it was helpful, but it was really soft skills that I learned when I was a young girl that came back, so many years later. I ain't gonna tell y'all how old I am, but so many years later that got me through my experience.
I can add something to that. About you referenced what college degrees you may or may not use, and you both covered so much. You pretty much covered the whole range of transferable skills. So I just wanted to add that almost everything is transferable. Almost any degree you have or certification transfers over to some part of the supply chain or somewhere in the cannabis economy, and across ancillary businesses as well. So that reminded me to mention that we have plans to do future sessions about ancillary, because there's so much, everything ties over there. And we've Woke has a session from 2020 that's specifically about transferable skills and resume. So we do have other resources that covers some of this too. And I'll just mention my degree was anthropology. And when I was too far along to turn back and realized it's not what I wanted to continue with, because it's directly a result of colonization. Anthropology is not something I wanted to spend more money on a master's degree on. But I feel that it completely relates to the cannabis industry, just understanding people, working with people from all walks of life. Cannabis brings together people from all walks of life. And then you're working with all kinds of weirdos where, there's a whole range of very professional weirdos all the way down to, people, much younger people who don't have a lot of work experience, but we all learn from each other too. So to Tamika's point about, the work experience I had as a teenager, restaurants, tutoring, just a lot of things that have already been covered. So I think the trick is to think about what are the skills that you have from the experience you do have, and of those things, which ones do you actually want to do? What do you like that you can do? And then hopefully these sessions are helping people figure out specific areas that you're open to. And we haven't even barely touched on things like lab testing. There's just so much as this is becoming a bigger industry. So data, technology, we've touched on that a lot. That's in every sector. And I'm not good at technology, but I love it because there's just so much possibility with technology. So yeah, I just wanted to emphasize that as well. And I think I'll end on that point for this slide, but technology is, you've got to get comfortable with it at least enough to be able to work with the techie people on your team, no matter what part of the industry you'll be in. It's heavily relies on technology.
Yes, I love technology. Well,
Danielle,
to some degree.
Can I piggyback off of what you just said really quickly? I want to really let people know that one of the ancillary businesses that's super duper important in this industry is marketing. You marketers not only have to know marketing, but they have to know the tech side of everything, because cannabis is one of the industries that gets to emerge into a super duper techie space. It's one of the first industries to go straight to being online and not, after so many years of just being a gray business, now that it's become legal, everybody accesses it from their phone or their computer. And so the marketing and the tech component, as well as knowing the regulations, finding a marketing company that's really good, that actually knows what they're doing, but has a full grasp of the regulations and the online digital media elements is super duper important. That portion of my business we currently outsource because there's just so many octopi to that particular part that was just not something that I wanted to deal with. We literally have a team of people that manage our social media, that manage our integration between, our online menus and our inventory, that can say, hey, Mika, no, we can't sell lollipops. We can't sell these types of branded materials. That's forbidden in the regulations. Those folks are super duper important. So if you're still scared of maybe getting in the industry, touch a cannabis touching industry, but you're fascinated by it, you're good at marketing, that is a great space to jump into. And you probably don't know that you have skills that will lend right into that space, especially on the tech side of it. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, and stay tuned for future CannaCareers sessions, because we're going to talk all about that and unpack what marketing in the cannabis industry looks like. So we're going to have a future session on that. And talking about transferable skills, though, it is important to know when to list what transferable skills. And I think it's very important that we actually, when we're applying for jobs, that we're looking at those job descriptions so that we can take those transferable skills and plug it in and have it make sense to what the employer is looking as far as the position we're looking at. So making our resumes not only just objective, but making it specific to the job that we are looking for, and listing relevant experience. Danielle, I know you review a plethora of resumes routinely. Do you want to speak to what you're looking for on resumes, those transferable skills and keywords?
Sure. And one helpful thing is the downloads. There's some worksheets on the Woke CannaCareers website that are a guide for this. So you can either reference the PDF or some of us print it out and go through multiple copies of different versions of resumes, different ideas, because you have so many skills that could be on there. So I think one of the first steps is to set yourself up with an organizational approach where you can look at a lot of the things you have done and then work towards the shortest version possible, the 1-page resume, the half-a-page cover letter, your LinkedIn profile. There's a lot of different ways you can approach this and different pieces of it. You just want to keep current depending on the situation. So as Ashley said, look at job descriptions. I don't think of the MSOs, the really big cannabis companies, as the best employers, but they always have a bunch of jobs listed on their homepage. So even if you don't use social media, you can go to the homepage of any large cannabis company and they'll have 100 jobs listed, sometimes not hundreds, but the idea is to get familiar with what the job descriptions look like and also look at a range, because and the point of webinars like this is that there's also a lot that's not in the job description. You'll see a lot of the same stuff listed. You'll see really detailed ones. You'll see really short ones. So you want to be able to show the employer that you've thought about what the job entails and how your skills fit into that. You can do that in the interview too. So I also recommend keeping some fun tidbits that maybe it's things that there's not room in your resume for it, but it's something you want them to know about you. Save that for the interview to get their attention. And just to touch back on when we were saying, all of your tech skills are so important. Finance, any kind of bookkeeping experience, even if you don't think it's related to the job description, honestly, I'm seeing a huge shortage in the cannabis space, people who can be trusted to do bookkeeping, payroll, things that might seem really simple, like QuickBooks. I always find out when I'm interviewing candidates, they'll be like, oh yeah, I do have QuickBooks experience. Okay, that should be on your resume. It's related to almost any job you're going to apply for. So the way to present that is kind of a catch-all. That's part of the resume format where there'll be a little skills section where it's a really brief list. So you also want to think about it in the different sections. That's where the worksheet will help. And just the most basic thing, spell check. I know that when you're doing a resume, it might be in a program where you can't actually spell check, but that's why you always want to have somebody, friend, it could even be like your 15-year-old niece, like somebody to look at your resume and see how they respond. Does anything jump out at them? The legibility, if you'll be surprised, sometimes you can read it, but you show it to someone and they're like, I can't read this section. There's too much there, or, it runs together. And I'll just for now end on always sending it as a PDF. That's along those lines of legibility, that if you send your resume to somebody as a Word doc, when they open it on their end, you have no idea what it's going to look like. What if they're looking at it on their phone and they can't read it, So sending a PDF is essentially sending a photo so that it looks exactly the same on the other end. So there's a whole range of things you have to think about. I'm not saying all this for it to feel overwhelming, but just to show that there's small tasks you can start with. Just start with whatever feels most interesting to you, and you'll have multiple drafts over time. It's kind of a living document. So and we have a resume review program through Woke as well. So I think we'll be covering some of that at the end today of how to stay in touch with us about all of this.
Danielle, can I piggyback on you really quick? 3 keywords for me on a resume in the skills section are Microsoft Excel, Google Workspace, and Microsoft Teams. If you know how to use those, you are like gold to me. I don't know how many times my team and I screw up trying to do a calendar invite. Like, I know it sounds like the most minuscule thing, but there's one person on my team who just happens to be really good at all those things. So when we have meetings, that is the person who's in charge of all of our data, because we just, everybody has their thing that they're good at, and I'm just not good at those. So anytime I see someone who is great at Excel, I'll teach them how to do everything else. But if you have a great attitude and you have Excel on your resume, you know how to do a PowerPoint presentation, you are really good at Zoom, like you know how to do all the functions in Zoom. It's those skills that we sometimes forget. We pass off like everyone knows how to do them, but let me tell you, baby boomers do not know how to use those things. Middle-aged folks like me are always pressing the wrong button. So if you have those skills, I mean, and I'm speaking to y'all really facts. I'm making myself vulnerable and put myself out there, but those skills are super duper important, and they come in handy to a team. So keep that in mind. Like, don't forget to put those things on the resume because they jump out. They're check marks. They're not, I do more of this when I see resumes that have those things on there. So I wanted to give that little.
Yeah, thank you for that, Mika. Yeah, adding those systems that you've used, those technology systems that you've used and you're proficient in are very important. And to speak with, you spoke with Danielle, I know that a lot of the information might seem overwhelming, and luckily we do have that checklist. I don't know if you can see it, but you can download it. If you're old-fashioned like me, I like things printed. I printed it out, but that's a great way to get started. Our goal here is really to set you up for success. We want you to be successful in your job search and really gaining employment. And so we're trying to take something that seems so overwhelming and giving you the tools that you need to, okay, I've done this one task, let me check it off. Because I know for me personally, if I don't have a checklist, my brain feels scattered and it does feel overwhelming. And so our goal here is to set you up for success. Before we move on from the resumes, I wanted to ask now, we were looking at some larger companies and some smaller companies in the cannabis space, and where Mika, you really have the time, or your job allows you to kind of go through those resumes and read those and read the cover letters. But some companies, I know in other industries, use technology to scan resumes and to highlight those keywords. So do you have any advice, Danielle, Dion, or Mika? How can we create resumes that will hit those AI or those technology resume scanning software systems so that someone can actually read and then read through the lines and see our skills?
I'll mention something that you've said before, Ashley. For instance, with compliance positions, make sure you put the word compliance somewhere in there, but put it in context. The AI technology will find the word compliance, and then at the point where a human looks at it, you'll want that word to be in a context that makes sense, that's related to that job. So I see it as those two layers of really making sure to include some of the words that are in the job title and job description, but not to just put it on there somewhere, but to make sure it makes sense, and think about the different meanings of, or the different contexts of inventory. For instance, if it's inventory, make sure to list that with the jobs where you've handled inventory. So that also can help you figure out which things are most important to put on there, so that you're not making it too long, you're focusing it in on those keywords. And we do have them listed for each session that we've done in the past, specifically for those sectors. And I noticed, Dion, maybe you had something to add.
Yeah, I'd say definitely just line up with those keywords for sure. And one thing I would recommend, if you do have the opportunity, if you find the information for that hiring manager, definitely try to follow up with them, because sometimes AI sucks. When we're talking about AI in the context of, people of color and like women of color, it isn't always subjected to or developed in our best interest. So to be able to make that human touch point is definitely, it could be beneficial.
I have the cheat code. One of the things a few of the folks I've hired have told me about how they prepped their resumes to take their transferable skills and bring them into this space is they look at the job description and they take the words from the job description and they sub them in for the like words on their resume, on their existing resume. And that's kind of a way, if you're not necessarily familiar with the vernacular or the terminology, to make your resume kind of flow into what they're looking for. So I always look at the words and the terminology that are listed in my job description to make sure that those words are very clear when I'm posting the job. But also for you folks on the other side, use that terminology because it's the terminology that the person who's hiring created. So if you can kind of give them back their own buzzwords, they're definitely going to pay more attention to you. And they're probably going to set up their AI to look for those words. So that's a cheat code, y'all.
And Dion, what you said is we need a whole nother session on talking about how to get around AI because a lot of that's networking and, we could really talk about that a lot.
Don't get me started.
Yeah, something that comes to mind for me is, okay, I see here keywords.
I think we already really hit that.
Okay. And Mika, to your point about how to find the synonyms and like words, I do find myself looking up definitions of things as the industry grows. I've been doing it almost 20 years, but I'm constantly having to look up jargon because it's like a secret language. And so I think the key is to make sure you know what the word means if you're going to use it in your resume. And that's part of how we are always learning about which jobs we're best suited for too, is just like, it doesn't have to be cannabis that you're researching. Some of this is, general career advice and those basics of using the dictionary or thesaurus. Yeah, same with cover letter. And cover letter is a chance to tell a short story about something, but keep it short. In cannabis, I think a common thread through all of our work, everyone here today, is you do have to have a specific passion for cannabis. So that is relevant. But you don't need to take a whole paragraph on it in your cover letter because, maybe something, a specific interest in cannabis that's most relevant for the job you're applying for, just to put it out there, because then if the employer wants to know more about that, they'll want to contact you and talk about it in an interview, and you can kind of see how important is it to go into any of your personal history. But of course, your personality, some of your personal history, your connection to the plant and to the work is completely relevant. That's always something to include somewhere in the cover letter. And don't be afraid to use a creative format in the cover letter. I've seen thousands of cover letters. I'll be honest, I don't read them. I skim them. And things will catch my eye. Now, as it gets further along in the hiring process, when I'm working closely with, some finalists, of course, I read everything. But in the beginning, it could be like a list with some interesting, instead of bullet points, asterisks, some kind of visually something to get someone's attention. I think cover letters traditionally are in paragraph form and very formal, but it is okay to move away from that a little bit, especially for a creative position like a designer position, or really anything though, even cultivation. I like when there's some creativity in the formatting, but don't go crazy. Don't use italics. I can't read italics. You got to reel it in. That's why, again, you need a second opinion on all of this.
It's a good point to say I'd say it's a good time to say why, like why you're going to be valuable, why you will be able to contribute to the team, to the position. If you have the chance to like peek at the actual company and you can, you find their mission statement and things like that, and you actually resonate with that, I think that's a great time to mention that, just depending on who you're talking to, whoever might be reviewing your resume, that might actually matter to them. So
what I will say to kind of resonate with Danielle, we were having a really hard time finding people post COVID. Once we reopened, we were having a really hard time hiring really great people. There were a lot of people who wanted to work at the dispensary, but we were having a hard time finding people that we could count on and that we could trust. And so, one day one of the owners said to me, "How do we find good people?" And I said, "We have to hire people who are passionate about the industry, people who have a stake in this, people who have been not only just smoking weed forever, but folks who have been working with nonprofit organizations, folks who have medical cards, who have really been participating in the industry." We talk a lot about bringing in people from other places, but there are a lot of folks out there who have been a part of this whole big cannabis industry and world for a long time, who don't necessarily know that they have skills that transfer over into running a dispensary. For instance, a lot of dispensaries have a community outreach coordinator. Folks who have worked in nonprofits for years within the community don't know that they can come and get a spot in the cannabis industry and work with dispensaries and cultivations to do really meaningful work in their communities. So I'm always looking for someone who's part of a professional organization, someone who has been growing cannabis for a long time, folks who work in the medical field, in the medical cannabis industry, are always really great folks to rely on, to come and switch over to the recreational market. So I'm always looking for those folks who have a passion for cannabis, who think about it when they get up in the morning and think about it, when they go to bed at night, and are always looking for innovative ways to make things happen in the community. So put all of that stuff, on your cover letter. Put everything that you've done on. I'm always surprised to hear folks who don't include all that information are in their cover letter. Put it in there. It's so useful.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, I like that, using it, as a way to showcase your skills, what you've done in the industry, but share just enough so that you leave the hiring manager wanting to know more and you land that interview. We are, wow, can you believe we are just about out of time? If you have questions and you're here with us in our Zoom, feel free to throw those questions in the chat, throw the questions on the Facebook Live page if you're watching there. So as we're wrapping up, we can hopefully address some of those questions. We might not have time to go through all of this information in detail, but like we said, when you're interviewing, leave that cover letter so that you can share more about yourself and you can showcase your skills in that interview. Danielle, as we're waiting for some questions and we're wrapping up, do you want to talk about the interviewing process and negotiating salary and job positions and so forth.
Yeah, that's really case by case. You have to feel out the company, the role, what's going on in your life that you would need to discuss with them to make sure that you can follow through if they do offer you the position. So what I recommend is don't let all of this prevent you from applying or prevent you from interviewing. It's okay to turn down offers. If you're offered something and it turns out that it just doesn't seem like it can work, you can always turn that down. But when you're getting closer to that part of the hiring process is when you want to figure out transportation, for instance, just the practical logistical things. And sometimes an employer, especially if it's a good employer, if it's a good fit for you, you'll be able to talk to them about any hurdles that you see, because the employer, they want to make sure that you're taken care of as well. They want to make sure you're able to be at work and be on time. So bringing up transportation and figuring that out is okay. It's also humanizes it and is a chance to get to know what is it going to be like to work with that company as things come up in your life. How does it work when you need to request time off? Those are reasonable questions. So I think the idea is to think of all the possible questions you'll need to get answered before you can start working for this company. Don't ask them all, right? But prioritize 2 or 3 that are really fundamental, and then figure out, what does that mean for maybe having to negotiate the salary? Like, how much do you need to be able to make to be able to do it and for it to be sustainable for you? And again, find somebody you can talk to about this to run things by, because trying to figure it out all in your head or just writing it down to yourself can be really scary, and you don't know for sure what is a good idea to ask when you're negotiating and how. So a lot of it can be very uncomfortable, and just keep in mind that the people interviewing you and the managers, it's uncomfortable for them too. No matter how long we do it, it gets easier, but as far as like somebody asking that they just need to be able to try to get a higher salary, asking for a higher salary, saying something like, I'm really interested in working with you, but the rate you're offering me, I just don't know if that's going to work for me for more than 6 months or so. So can we talk about that? Just think of ways to approach it that puts you at ease and is just human, because the person on the other side, and if they react in a really toxic way, then you're not going to want to work for them anyway. Like, if you can't bring up really important questions and needs in the hiring process, then that's how it's going to always be working for them, that they're going to always be discouraging you from communicating your needs and boundaries. So I know that's like really general advice, but I know that we have plans to get into more detail about this in a future session, of course.
And before we move on, I just want to mention one thing that Mika said in the chat: advocate for yourself, like 100%. Like Danielle said, you need to be able to know that you're in a comfortable environment, that they care about your issues or possible issues for you. So you definitely want to advocate for yourself. You are your biggest champion, and you should definitely do so during that negotiation point, because they're interested in you. So you've gotten past the interview, you're now in talks, you're moving further down in the process. This is the time to, try to put yourself in the best position that you can. So shout out to Mika for putting that in the chat.